Well, Marvin and Nancy too.
All righty. See how my voice holds up for this today. We're going to look at Genesis 37. We'll jump right into it. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him, and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to the dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. And this time the sun and moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you have? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks at Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But when they saw him in the distance, and before it reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into a cistern. Now the cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine to see if it's your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning will I go down to the grave to my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Okay. Let me wet my whistle before I'll read it. A couple of questions here. First one there, describe Joseph's character. How old was he?
17.
17.
Handsome young lad, favorite of his dad.
Yep.
I like to tattle.
What was that?
He liked to tattle to the brothers when they did.
Yeah,
things
that
wrong.
played into it too.
It didn't help any.
He knew that his dad liked him more than the others, and he made it known too.
How was Joseph's moral character?
I think it
Was he a bad boy?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't say so.
If anything, I would picture him as a goody two-shoes, maybe. Character really, as far as talents, ability, he was pretty good. We'll talk a little bit more about his attitude in a little bit. Number 2, what did the dreams Joseph received from God say about Joseph's future? And then, why do you think God sent those dreams at this time? What did it say about the future?
He was going to be above his brothers.
Yeah.
It's going to be above his brothers. It's going to rule over them. What did they think of that?
No.
They weren't too thrilled, were they? You didn't tell me you're going to rule over me. Little did they know, right? See, we know the end of the story, don't we? We know what's going to happen. They didn't. Why did God send them these dreams?
I think at the time, it possibly could have been an encouragement later on when he gets sold.
Sure. You look
But
at
he
all that's
also
going to
was-
happen to Joseph in the next 20 years. And you think these dreams came back to remind him God made a promise. And he's going to keep it. They were an encouragement. How about 3? What responsibility must Jacob bear for his brother's ill feelings toward Joseph? Does Jacob deserve any blame here?
Yes.
Why?
He doted on that one son.
Yeah.
You don't show favorites, do you?
You're not supposed to.
Not supposed to. I have 4 kids. Do I have a favorite? No. They're all going to get loved the same way, and I treat them all the same way. Who was it? Vince Lombardi. Who was it? Somebody at the Packers used to say, Vince Lombardi treats us all the same, like dirt. You don't show favorites. Anything else with him? I mean, he showed favoritism. Of course, how did he show the favoritism, too?
He made that fancy coat.
You get this fancy coat. None of the other ones got it. And what did that do for the brothers?
Well,
I mean,
they're
imagine
jealous.
you're one of Joseph's brothers. How do you feel about all this?
Jealous.
Joseph gets away with everything, right? I mean, you probably heard that from your own kids at some point. How come they get to do that? How come I can't stay up this late? You know, things like that. Well, what about Joseph? What responsibility must Joseph himself bear?
Well, he didn't help himself really any this way because it kind of icked him on a little bit. So
Like you mentioned before, he was a tattletale, wasn't he? How well do tattletales go over in your house? Usually tell him, what do you tell a tattletale? Little Georgie is coming to you all the time saying, do you see what Joseph did?
you don't have anything good to say, then don't say it at all.
Just like the Bambi movie.
Yep.
What can you do to help? Joseph didn't help the matters. He was a tattletale. He was arrogant. He was foolish. He ran off at the mouth. Boastful. You know, a lot of times we make some of these guys out the Bible be such saints.
His dad though asked him to go and see how they were doing, but
Yeah.
I think he blowed it up.
Yeah. He didn't help the situation by sending Joseph back down there.
No.
And you can imagine what Joseph would come back with. I mean, we heard what he did before. I mean, would you want your little brother to come out and scout you out and then go back to dad? You know what he's going to say. These guys were screwing around out there. They weren't doing their job, right? They didn't like things like that. You know, even with the dreams. It was bad enough he shared the dream once. But then turn around and do it again? You know they're going to get mad. And of course, he probably looked and said, you aren't going to touch me. I'm Dad's favorite.
Yeah, but God had a plan with him telling him that.
Oh, yeah. God had a reason for telling him. I think he told him these dreams now because he was going to have some pretty rough times coming. And he could look back and say, God made some promises to him.
And if he wouldn't have told them to them brothers, they wouldn't have sold him away to do what he was supposed to do.
It was all part of God's plan, wasn't it? I mean, we look at it and say, it's like Joseph told his brothers later on. You intended to harm me. God intended it for good. It was God's plan all the way along. We can't always see that in our lives either. How about 4? Compare the sufferings of Joseph to those of Jesus. There are some similarities, but they are not the same.
They
Stripped him of his coat.
Sold
Okay,
for money.
stripped,
Sold for money.
sold for a slave's price.
Yeah.
Was he Dad's favorite?
Oh, certainly.
This is my
Praise
beloved
God.
Son, whom I love, with him I'm well pleased. Of course, God doesn't show favoritism, does he? What did Jesus' brothers think of him?
No.
His brother, his son betrayed him.
They thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting, that's why I said in the sermon this morning, for a time there, his brothers and sisters didn't want anything to do with him. Later on, it's a little different story. We hear about his brothers actually believing at that point. His brother James lost his head. Maybe it wasn't that James. One of the James. Anyways, they suffered unjustly. Of course, Jesus did it for us. All right, how about the last one here? What bits of advice might you have shared with Jacob's family that would also help the relationships in your family? Look at Jacob and his family. What advice would you give them?
Well, he ended up that he had technically 4 wives.
4
He had-
wives.
he
First
had
of all, I
one-
would have said limit it to 1. Because what's the problem?
You don't get along.
I mean, you have more than 1 wife, there's going to be jealousy. 'Cause you look at Jacob, he had a favorite son. Do you have a favorite wife?
Yes, it
Yes,
was
he
Rachel,
did.
and that's
Rachel.
why Joseph
That
and Benjamin were.
That favorite wife was supposed to be his first wife, too.
Mm-hmm. He got
And then
gypped out of it.
And he didn't get any children with that one until the others all came along.
And we hear of all the fighting and bickering between the wives, don't we? Okay, so that's done. Now what advice are you going to give him? He's already got 4 wives, so what advice you give him now?
Get rid of 3 of them.
He actually,
Kind of tough
one
to do that.
actually died, I mean, as soon as Benjamin was born, so he was down to
Rachel was dead.
Maybe 4
Yes.
more.
Yeah, but then he got some more after her.
So, first thing I would tell him is stop showing favoritism.
Yeah.
I've seen what favoritism does to families. Look at what happens to this family. Does that happen today?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It happens all the time. Tell them to watch hatred, jealousy. I mean, doesn't that happen a lot, jealousy in families?
The result of that is often in the news.
I didn't hear.
Jealousy in the family is often, we hear about it in the news.
Yeah. What they end up doing to each other. And it happens all the time. It's not just mom and dad who do it, teachers do it too. You're the youngest, you get to school, and your brothers and sisters were big athletes. They expect you to be, right? Or your brother and sister were straight A students. And I expect the same.
Where's that dummy?
Doesn't always happen in every family, Bob.
Happened to him.
But, you know, you can tell them to watch out the sins of hatred, jealousy, arrogance. There's a lot of things you can tell them. And what do you do if you have a gifted child?
Encourage that child
Yeah.
to use their gifts, however, don't elevate them because of the gift.
Right. I like to pick on my mom on this. She's dead, she can't yell at me now. My mom was gifted. She had graduated from college by the time she was 17. She had skipped a whole bunch of grades. And of course you look at your own kids and you think, got some pretty smart kids here. First thing my mom said was, don't you ever skip grades. I mean, she saw what had happened. 17, and you're graduating from college?
You didn't fit ready.
This isn't 2013, 14. This was back 1940. I mean, first of all, did women graduate from college?
Not
Not
very
an
many.
awful lot.
Not very many.
And can you imagine being a 17-year-old, you don't even have a driver's license yet, and you're hanging out with kids that are 22, 23? I remember her telling us, don't you ever skip grades with your kids. You'll find ways to keep up the gifts. Do things outside. And what happens today? Do you see that today?
Occasionally.
We don't really see the skipping of grades as much, but sometimes we encourage children that are not gifted to be gifted. You know, I think of sports. Sometimes dad thinks his son is the greatest football player there is. And keeps encouraging him, you're going to be in the pros. Well, what are the odds? Kid's my size, I don't think he's going to be a linebacker in the NFL. I can't remember what the stats are on the percentage of kids who, in high school, who actually make it to the pros. 1%, if that
I
much?
think it's even
No, I don't think it's that much even.
Right,
It's
yes,
very little.
because
Very little. You have to be above average in talent. And even guys who play baseball. I mean, the guy who may be the greatest at his school isn't going to do it in the pros.
Probably some of those highlight pictures that we see probably never went to school much.
I always get a chuckle out of, well, growing up and you'd watch the Rose Bowl and they'd introduce all the players. And basically say, Tom Marzinski majors in basket weaving. All this other thing. There were always a few classes you knew what they were. Back then, was it communications?
Yep.
Now it's physical education. In other words, these guys are majoring in gym. And I've had some friends who have gone through college on scholarships, full rides, and I know what classes they took.
They
And,
like,
oh, the one, all he had to do was show up at the exam, say hi. And because he was one of the top players in the nation, professor said, sign your paper. And he signed it and he basically said, you passed. Never had to go to class. And,
they sure helped him, didn't they?
oh, they sure did. Eventually he got wise and he quit playing sports. And I remember he showed me his doctorate paper. I couldn't even understand the title. And he's got at least one doctorate. Very smart guy. He didn't have to show up to class anyways, but still. Anyways, I got off on some tangents here. Do you have any questions? We're going to hear more about Joseph in the weeks ahead. Well, we'll close with the prayer that we have here. Heavenly Father, Satan wants to destroy one of your greatest gifts to us, our families. Lead us by your power to forgive and love and to protect our families, that they may be for us the rich blessing you intend. In our Savior's name, amen. Turn the camera off, tell you that story.